Sort of know what I'm doing. Deconverted man here. And I don't know what I'm doing, but that never stopped me before. Not going to stop me now. And let's see if my video is showing up or not. Nope. Yep. Yep. No idea what's going on. Now that's the plus. That's not what we want.
It should show up after a few minutes, but that's just me.
You know what? I'm gonna exit out of that.
I can see the live video.
And, all right. Well. Okay. Hold on a moment. Let's pretend that Deconverted Man knows what he's doing. I blame. It's my fault. I can't blame anyone this time. Not eBay. What are you doing, computer? Deconverted Man says words. Yes, I know. YouTube. Go to YouTube. Patience over there. Wow, it's not good. The audience. Alright, that's okay. This gives you control over who's talking and who's not.
But you've got the headphones.
I've got the headphones. Oh, goodness.
Well, I thought you were going to put it on speakers.
No, because it will cause an echo.
Ah, well then, why don't you put the headphones on that one?
Because I couldn't hear it.
Then that's what I said.
Hey, there it is. Here's where the chat room will be.
Right. The only way you're going to be able to do it is to have the other headphones, I think, and you said you didn't want to use those.
Chat's disabled for live stream. Oh, my word.
Whatever. Let's do the hangout thingy and get it done.
Oh, my word. What do you...
I'm exhausted, Doug. I want to do this and get it done. I thought it was because we had started an hour ago.
Yeah. My moderator's being grumpy. Whatever, I guess we're not going to have a Q&A. Screw that. So here's the moderator. Okay, introduce me. Introduce him.
I don't know who he is.
I
don't know anything.
Root Times.
Okay, so we have Deconverted Man and we have Root Times. We're going to be discussing this very interesting question of, does God exist in the mind, or also out here in the real world with everything else? Each person will have a 5-minute introduction, then a 5-minute answer to that rebuttal, and then
another rebuttal,
and then after that there'll be time for questions and answers.
Wow.
If anybody's going to go over, I'll interrupt and pause you. Other than that, that's it, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, and then you want to flip a coin to see who goes first or something?
I can go first if you want me to.
Alright, I don't care. Go ahead. Give me my lobster.
Alright, so am I being timed?
You got the time there?
Yes.
Alright, whenever you're ready, say go.
Okay, I just want to say that English is not my first language, so if I misspell something or say something wrong, I apologize, but I'm going to do my best at explaining what I want to say and have everything written down, because I've never done something like this, so if it seems like I'm reading, it's because I am reading, okay?
Okay.
Alright, I'm ready.
All right, he's ready.
Okay, well, we go.
Go.
Okay, I'm going to argue the claim that God does exist. His nature is as defined in the Bible: eternal, almighty, all-knowing, and omnipresent. And I'm going to explain how the claim is logically sound and that it goes in accordance with what we know about the universe today. And I'll use a logical process called deductive reasoning.
I can hear what he's saying.
The universe is either eternal or had a beginning. If it's eternal, that would mean that it has an eternal past. And it doesn't make sense that it's eternal if something came from something else and then something else from something else and then something else from something else forever. It doesn't make sense logically. Infinity in the universe is quantifiable, and something that is quantifiable related to quantity cannot be infinite. If there's a room with an infinite amount of people in it and I subtract 10, how many people would be have left? Infinity? If you take 10 away from infinity, we should have a number, and we don't. So infinity makes no sense in the quantifiable world. Whereas God being eternal is not quantifiable, but rather qualifiable. And even in science, it doesn't make sense that the universe is eternal. The Big Bang model supports a finite universe. Physicist Lawrence Krauss states that the universe may have come from nothing, but he doesn't mean exactly nothing. He means something that physicists call nothing. But it is something. It relates to the quantum vacuum that is indeed something. So we can then logically conclude that the universe had a beginning. It has been heavily observed, and it is factual, logically, and scientifically, that everything that exists in the universe has a cause. Therefore, the universe had a beginning and had a cause. If this cause was also caused, we would again go back to the same problem, an infinite past, something that we concluded to be logical. So this cause was uncaused, meaning that nothing caused it to exist. If it's uncaused, the only logical conclusion is that it has always existed. Looking at the complexity of life consciousness and the complexity of the universe and the laws of physics, and so complicated and so unchangeable, we must agree that this cause had to be 1, eternal, 2, extremely smart, and 3, very powerful. So we can conclude that it makes perfect sense that the cause is eternal, but I'll explain how he is also almighty, all-knowing, and I will argue omnipresent, meaning that he is everywhere as well. I'll explain each. Eternal, meaning that it has always existed, and we have already concluded this. Almighty, if he created everything that exists, then by definition he can do everything. All-knowing, if he knows how to create such immense complexity like the one in every aspect of reality, and knows how such reality works, then he knows everything. Omnipresent, this one is the most reasonable considering that he is all-knowing, meaning that he knows everything. If he knows everything that goes on, it is the same as saying as being everywhere. So we can see that the universe had a cause, and this cause meets the definition of the God given in the Bible: eternal, almighty, all-knowing, and omnipresent. We can see that my claim is logical, and it goes in accordance with what we know about the universe, and it is the best logical explanation for the existence of the universe. I hope that the rebuttals, if any, are logically sound, and that also goes in accordance with what we know about the universe. That's it.
My time begins whenever you're ready, moderator.
Give it a couple more seconds.
Yeah. Do you have the that up or?
Huh? Yeah, I'm watching it. Okay.
I don't want to wait forever.
No, I'm waiting for 10 o'clock exactly.
Oh.
Okay, go.
Does the Christian God exist as a concept in our brains or a reality with everything else? There are plenty of things that exist as concepts in our brains. A few examples: letters, numbers, musical notes, and universal constructs. These are things that we can write, draw, we can explain them to each other, but they don't exist out here with the rest of us. They exist in our brain as a concept. Now, there is, of course, the issue of which Christian concept of God my opponent's referring to. There's plenty of Christian concepts to pick from. But I would say any concept of God that requires one to deny any part of reality is one that could only exist in the mind and nowhere else. If, for example, your God requires you to assert that the earth is flat, then that is not a God that can exist anywhere but the mind, for it doesn't align with reality. If your concept of God is one that requires you to deny science, history, or logic at any level for any reason, it is not a God that can exist in reality. And a logical God is useless. A God that ignores history is ignorant. And a God that is anti-science belongs in the myth section. So, let me put forth my syllogism for these ideas. Premise 1, either this concept of God exists in reality or merely as a concept in the brain. Premise 2, any God concept that requires a rejection of reality on any level can only exist in the brain. Premise 3, my opponent's God concept probably requires a rejection of reality on some level. And conclusion, we must think that my opponent's God concept exists only in the brain. Now, this syllogism can be negated if and only if my opponent produces a God concept that does not require negation of any bit of reality, be it historical, scientific, or logical in nature. Because I don't know, as of this writing, my opponent's concept, I cannot have a disjunctive syllogism as premise 3. It has to be hypothetical for now. In my rebuttals, that might change once I learn more about his particular God concept. My opponent could also negate my entire argument by presenting us with empirical evidence and or a repeatable test for his God concept. At the very least, we should have a logically coherent argument for it, and unless and until we have such an argument, we must be skeptical of his conclusions. Drop the mic. I'm done.
All right, let me know when it's my time.
Okay, well, that was very short. It was 100 times, so I'll give more questions for time for Q&A later. And go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
All right. He never mentioned. Well, I guess because I went first, so he couldn't know. But also, his statement, his claim, he didn't show any evidence for it whatsoever. You know, he just posed that we should question everything, which is right. I don't think it's wrong. But he didn't say why, like what reasons we have. You know, I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying he didn't take the time to show any arguments or reasons as to why that's the way we should think. Because, you know, science contradicts the definition or the qualities of God sometimes. But to say that science is the only way to know whether something is right or wrong is self-defeating, because how do you know that science is right? Because science is right? You know, science is right doesn't prove that science is right. You know, you have to show a different argument for the validity of the scientific method. I'd like to know also what scientific evidence or reasoning or claim contradicts in my arguments, the ones that I presented a little bit ago.
Okay. How's that?
That was the rebuttal. Okay, my opponent did not rebuttal any of my premises at all, but instead asked for evidence. We're not engaged in a empirical evidence-seeking type of discussion. This is a persuasionary dialogue. If you have empirical evidence for God, please present it. I can't show you non-evidence God other than going like, where's God? I don't see it. That's pretty not logical, so I won't do that. He says science sometimes contradicts God attributes. I wasn't really clear where he was coming from on that or how that's relevant. If science contradicts any of God attributes, then anything about that particular attribute would have to not exist because it's contradicted by science or reality itself. Uh, he asked how you know science is right, which is relevant for this discussion. I did not introduce that question or concept. I did say that if God denies science, history, or logic at any level, it would then therefore be a God concept that can only exist in the brain. So justifying science is outside the bounds of this particular debate. And he complained that I didn't show while I gave a logically coherent argument. You have to knock down those premises, which my opponent didn't do. Actually, I'm rebuttaling his rebuttal, which is a formal fallacy on my part. I should have been rebuttaling his opening argumentation. So disregard everything I just said if you're worried about formal fallacies. His opening was a broken clone cosmological argument, which has already been debunked scientifically and logically. So no to all of it. And it doesn't align with reality. We don't know that everything requires a cause. He went into a little bit about Lawrence Krauss and his version of nothing versus the philosopher's nothing. We've never been shown that the philosopher nothing is a thing in the first place, so we have no example of it to talk anything about it at all, so it cannot be within science. So right there, that shoots down the Kalam as a scientific venture. And there are other logical problems with the Kalam, notwithstanding the problems that my opponent had presenting it. It goes like this, just to fix it for my opponent. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe begin to exist, therefore the universe needs a cause. That's the Kalam cosmological argument. You're welcome. But that's not what my opponent presented. He just said infinity doesn't make sense, which is an assertion and an appeal to consequence. He asked a question which is a formal fallacy. He said that science supports a finite rather than infinite. I don't see that being true. He asserted that the universe had a beginning, which again, that's the Kalam and doesn't work on a scientific level. He asserted that God is all-knowing, which is contrary to logic because it would have logical paradoxes built into it. And then he said that the universe has a cause, but that's another assertion without any argument to support it. So that's the rebuttal to his opening and his rebuttal, so I'll withdraw my secondary rebuttal and give him 2 rebuttals.
Okay, is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I assume that you said the sense that if science contradicts whatever attribute of God or his nature, that the nature of the attribute is automatically wrong. And so I assume that you believe in the scientific method as the only way to know whether something is factual or not. A method that is not infallible, a method that has failed before, a method that has shown supposed scientific theories that were later on found out wrong. So how come it's that the claim or the attribute or nature of God is automatically wrong without actually taking the time to consider whether the scientific theory is actually valid or not? So that's why I made that argument. And again, you keep saying that, okay, this argument wrong, this argument wrong, that argument wrong, and you don't tell me a logical reason as to why it is wrong. You assume that you're right, and you assume that everybody watching already knows everything that you're talking about, and they may assume it to be true due to an argument from, I forgot what it's called, authority. And so, again, you have not shown a logical reason why my arguments are flawed and not logically sound. And I showed an argument, a logical argument for the universe having a cause. You know, it's not just something that I made up. You know, and well, you know what I mean. And so, if you want your opinion to be taken seriously, you should show some arguments and not assume that maybe you're right, but you have to show why you're right. You don't go to an argument and say, okay, you're wrong, therefore I win. This is a debate. You know, you have to show your arguments, and in your opening statement, you didn't show any evidence or logical argument. You're just assuming, you're making statements that you're not showing logical arguments for, you're not showing evidence for, you're not showing anything that backs up your opening statement. You're just making claims that are fallacious, like the one that science is the only way to know whether something is right or wrong, because science, if you assume the naturalist position, you would have to prove that this reality is the only one that exists, that this nature is the only one that there is. And that's what the naturalists believe, that this is the only reality. And that would be a claim. A claim requires an argument. A claim requires evidence. A claim requires to be backed up. You can't just say something and assume that everybody believes you. You know, you have to show why you're right. And the statements that you make, you have to show evidence, you have to show arguments, you have to show something for them. You know, you can't just say, that argument is wrong, that argument is wrong, that argument is wrong, because that's not how a debate works, right? I think you would agree to that. Maybe you're not realizing it, but that is what you're doing. You're making me seem like you're basically making a straw man, you know, and you're basically, you know, just assuming that I'm wrong without showing as to why I'm wrong. And if I'm just desperately wrong, you know, just tell me a few reasons, you know, just address my arguments, the ones that I presented, that are logically sound, you know. They're not just, I didn't make them up. I know they're not new. I know they've been, you know, proposed before a million times. But again, I'm not just repeating what someone says. I'm not making statements. I am showing logical arguments and logical reasons. And it is in accordance with what science states. So it is logically sound, and it doesn't contradict any evidence. So I would please ask you to address my arguments as much as you can, and don't just assume that you're right without showing for it.
Okay, Deconverted Man.
Was that 10 minutes? You have another 5 minutes if you want it. I gave you both of my rebuttals. This will be my closing.
Okay, I would just like to know what's the argument for the impossibility of the scientific method to be wrong? How is it impossible to be wrong? If a scientific method discovers or theorizes something that contradicts God, how does that make God, you know, the attribute of God automatically wrong, when science, the scientific method, has been wrong many times before? So you can't just, because science says it, that makes it true, because it's a scientific theory that is the absolute truth, because that would be a fallacy. That would be illogical. That is fundamentally wrong. And again, the only way to show that the scientific method is the only way to really know something, you would have to show an argument for the validity of the scientific method without using the scientific method. Because the only way to know whether the scientific method is true or not is because it is assumed that the scientific method is right. There is no logical argument, there is no proof that the scientific method is true other than the scientific method is true. So I'm asking for arguments, evidence to back up everything you're saying. I make logical claims, and I try to back up everything that I'm saying. You know, I'm not just stating, you know, what I believe. I am showing for it. That's my review.
Okay.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. This will be my closing. I gave my opponent 2 rebuttals because I rebutted his opening after rebuttaling his rebuttal. That was a formless fallacy on my part, so I thought I'd be generous and give him both my rebuttals. So I'll rebuttal his only half try at a rebuttal. So he said that he assumes that I would only use science. That would be a special knowledge fallacy on his part. He shouldn't assume anything. I never said that science is the only way. He wants, again, a way to know if a scientific theory is valid or not. He doesn't know what the word theory means in science, would be my only conclusion to draw from that statement. If something is proven wrong, then it's no longer a theory. So look up what that means. I can give references to scientific theory definitions in the description, but I don't have any ready because the topic of the debate is whether God's a concept in our brain or in reality. And in my opening, I gave an argument, unlike what my opponent continues to say, is that I never showed anything, which isn't relevant in a logical argument. You give an argumentation, you don't show evidence. So I think he's having some problems with natural language issues, perhaps, or he might not understand how logic functions. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, I said premise one, either God exists in our brains or in reality. Any God concept that requires a rejection of reality on any level, be it scientific, historical, or logical, has to be only in the brain. In other words, if God requires us to think something about reality that isn't in fact real, then that God concept could only exist in the brain. So if your God concept requires you to deny biological evolution, then that God concept cannot exist in reality because it denies reality. You can't have it both ways. You can't say the earth is flat. My God says the earth is flat. No, your God can't exist in reality because the earth is an obloid spheroid. It isn't flat. The third premise, which was a hypothetical syllogism, which was my opponent's God concept probably required a rejection of reality on some level, is now a disjunctive syllogism. Well, actually, it's not even disjunctive syllogism. It becomes an actual premise. It no longer is a hypothetical premise. My opponent's concept of God, if he is basing his concept of God on the Kalam cosmological argument, fails at a scientific level. If my opponent wants to use science and then question science, you can't have it both ways. Either you accept science or you don't. You can't pick and choose when and when you don't want to accept science. So if you accept cosmology, which is the study of the universe from a scientific standpoint, then you must reject the Kalam cosmological argument in every format, but especially the poor format that my opponent attempted to present. He's right. He didn't come up with that. It's not original. We've heard it before. It's been debunked before many times. It's not scientific because nowhere in any scientifically published paper that I'm aware of does any scientist that is a cosmologist state that the universe has a cause or that the universe has a beginning or anything of that nature that my opponent asserts in his attempted argumentation, which is a borrow from the Kalam, which I corrected him on because he couldn't even present it correctly. Nonetheless, it's not just no, but it's no for logical reasons and no for scientific ones. So your concept of God exists solely in your brain, nowhere else. That is the logical argument. That is what you must rebuttal, but you haven't done that so far. I doubt you're going to do it in your closing, but I wish you all the luck in the world. Not that I believe luck exists. And yeah, try to rebuttal one of my premises. I would suggest to my opponent. That would
I'll do it with pleasure.
There you go. I'm done.
Okay. Your whole argument is based on the assumption that science is always right. That is the assumption that you're making. That science is always right. A scientific theory is a very, very, very well backed up hypothesis that it becomes a scientific fact. I am not denying the veracity of a scientific fact, a scientific theory. What I'm saying is that you can't just say that because science said it, which is based on a method that it seems to work. I'm not saying that the scientific method does not work. The claim that I'm making, well, not the claim, the point that I'm making is that you're basing your whole argument and your whole beliefs on the assumption that the way that you figure things out is the right way, that is impossible to be wrong. You said that the reason why I said the whole thing, maybe you forgot, I'll repeat it. You said that if science or historical facts or anything else that is considered by scientific community to be good enough reason, that therefore, if it contradicts something, some quality about God, that it is mandatory and the only solution is to deny the quality of God without taking into consideration how many times, how many scientific theories, scientific facts, things that are considered to be true by the scientific community, that it is automatically right because it never fails. There's many things that science has stated as a fact that has been wrong before, and that is the point that I'm making. Your whole reasoning, your whole argument, your whole thing is based. You're saying that since I'm not going to paraphrase. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. But think about everything you just said, taking into consideration that you base your argument on the assumption that this reality is the only one that is, that the scientific method is the only way to know something, and that if something contradicts the nature or the science, that there is no room for doubt that it is right and cannot be wrong. So before saying that something has to be wrong because science has a scientific fact that contradicts the quality of something, you know, one of them is not right. If it's a contradiction, one of them has to be wrong. But you cannot just assume the science is the one that is right, because science has been wrong, and the scientific method has not been shown to be infallible, and it has been shown to be not fallible because it has been wrong. It is not 100% bulletproof. I'm not saying that therefore everything the science says is wrong. I'm not saying that therefore you're wrong or I'm right. I'm just saying take into consideration the fact that you base your whole argument on the assumption that the scientific method is the only way to know something and that is right, without showing argument and logical reason other than the science itself. You assume the scientific method is right because it just seems to be right. That is logical fallacies. Just show evidence for your assumption that science never fails and that the scientific method is infallible. That is my conclusion, because you seem to base everything on assumptions. I show explanations. I show logical reasons. I back up what I say. It is not based on assumption. There's a logical streak to it, and you fail to do the same, and that is my conclusion.
Okay, we're out of time on the conclusion there. Thank everybody for participating. We're going to try to see if we can do the Q&A section and see if it'll work.
We have.
I can post my own comments later on the video. I think that there's several places where,
as a moderator.
yeah, several things I'd love to say, but as a moderator, I just have to keep my mouth shut. But I do have an opinion on the whole thing.
We'll only
but,
be able to take questions from people in the chat room.
Yeah.
Or in the
so if you're in the chat room right now, we're going to really try to do the Q&A thing because we would love to do that. Let's see if we can do it.
Let's find out.
Well, what do you do?
Is it safe to
we've
talk?
got two people in here. We've got Logitry and Truth.
Yes.
And
yes.
I didn't
Yes.
want to. I didn't want to
Hello?
interrupt either of you. That was actually a very good debate.
Okay. Direct who you want to ask your question to, and then that person will answer, and the other person can answer if they want to. They don't have to, though. Sorry, I forgot to tell the moderator how to do that part. Do you have anything for either of us, Logic Tree? It's just
No, I just think you both performed well. Comments on the debate over who I think was right and wrong. I'd say I go into this. The only thing I'll say on that is that I do go into this with a bias because I am an atheist, and from that bias, I'm trying to derive a core Vulcan-like logical opinion. But I like I just like the civility of it. I think it was moderated well. I think it was both participants performed with a good personality, respect for each other.
Okay. That wasn't a question, but thank you for the kind words. Soldier something. You got anything for either one of us?
Yeah, I got a couple questions if you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can.
All right. Is it possible that the evidence exists, but you misinterpret it?
There's a question for
You.
Oh, for me? What evidence?
Like me, for example, I would personally say that I can look all around and see all kinds of different evidence for God, and you would argue that it's not. So is it not a matter of interpretation also?
Well, I guess if you're asking how do we interpret reality, in my argument, I said that anything that conflicts with reality would be something that if your God requires you to ignore or deny X, Y, and Z aspects of reality, then that is a God that cannot exist in reality, since you're already saying, well, in order for my God to be real, the earth has to be flat, for example.
Sorry, I think you guys just heard me. I was yelling at a game.
Oh, no, I didn't hear you until you
I actually
gave
did.
my answer. But my answer to the am I interpreting reality wrong? I don't know. Possibly, we could all be, for all I know. But as far as I'm aware, my sensory inputs are functioning normally. So the reality that I see is identical to nature. If I'm supposed to be seeing God, then all I'm seeing is nature. That's on God, not on me. If God is identical to nature, then we have no need to have the name God. But going back to my argument that I presented today was, whatever God is, it cannot conflict with reality. Otherwise, it cannot exist.
So basically, your reality, according to your interpretations of everything that you see.
Well, we all base what we think is real.
I'm sure we
based
could
on
come,
our
like, we could
sensory
see eye to
input.
eye on most stuff. I'm not arguing that, but you said X, Y, and Z, but some of that could be kind of gray area, you know.
I don't know what that would be, but
I'd like to answer that question.
yeah, you can answer that question. I'm done. I provided my answer.
I don't think you realize it. That you automatically think that this reality is the only one that there is, and to believe so requires an argument. You can't just say this is all there is because I can prove anything else. That is an argument from ignorance. For you to say that this is the only reality, you have to show a sound argument that shows that this is in fact the only reality there is. If there is another reality and the God of all realities tells you that what you think is wrong because there's a reality that's higher than this reality. This is all our presupposition. I'm not saying, it can. Anyways, I'm proposing something that if a God of a higher reality tells you that this reality is not all there is, that your opinion may be wrong. You you can't just assume that since you didn't hear that God, since you didn't feel, or whatever reason that person may have, that therefore this is the only reality there is, without showing a sound argument, because it is a claim, and every claim requires an argument. To say that this is the only reality, you have to show an argument for it.
All right, and Truth, you said you had a couple, so do you have a second question to either of us?
Actually, wait. Could I also weigh on this question?
Sure.
I
Yeah.
would just say that to expand on what Deconverted Man said before of all the processors firing correctly, what I would say would be that if we are making a mistake in interpreting reality, I would say we were all making the same mistake. And if we are all making the same mistake in interpreting reality, then wouldn't that mistake be subjectively correct? But at the same time, there is no way to possibly know if we are interpreting reality correctly, or what any, if there would be omnipresent definition of correct would be.
So the only position, it would be an agnostic position, because there's no way to show whether this is the only reality, that if something is true in this reality, that therefore, it's true in every other reality.
Yes, I would say
So
that.
you're conceding that the best position is a skeptical one and I win the debate?
You can't just say, I doubt this, I doubt that in the debate.
Sure you can.
Yeah, no, in the debate, it's not about doubts. It's about a statement. It's about a claim that you have to show evidence.
I couldn't help myself.
Here. Dan, you're talking over.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, my bad. Formal fallacy on me. That's 2 on me.
But respond to Truth.
Right. Well, Logic wanted to add, so that was his addition. And then...
Yeah, I'm sorry if I went on too long.
That's alright. It wasn't really a question, but we don't know what we're doing. Truth, you had maybe another question for one of us, both of us?
I wasn't sure about, with your statement that you made previously, if you were insinuating that the God of the Christian Bible goes against history or something?
No. Not necessarily. I was asserting that it was possible, because obviously I wrote my opening before engaging in debate with my opponent. I didn't know what his concept would be. Anything that goes against reality or requires you to deny any aspect of reality.
I'm sorry.
If that is required for your God, then your God can only exist in your head and not out here. Your God has to be possibly real to have any chance.
I agree. Real. I actually agree with your concept somewhat. It's just I don't think it's something you can take with and run with it and like really make it more than it is either. Like you could take it so far.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. And it was my opening for my opponent to win or lose his side on, and it's up to the audience to decide who had a logically coherent argument and who did not. And I can't analyze my own arguments or his arguments for this debate. That wouldn't be very fair.
I would like to
ask.
ask
How about this question? What would you consider to be evidence? Since you have your own way of thinking, so what would it take to be considered evidence?
Empirical evidence, a repeatable test, or a logically coherent argument.
Yeah. What evidence of what exactly?
What do you got?
No, I mean,
that's what I asked. That's what I said. Those were 2 things that could have blown me out of the water for this debate: were empirical evidence or a repeatable test. We didn't get offered those. Logically coherent argument, I'll let the audience decide on who had that and who didn't.
So as far, okay, go ahead.
I'm just dying to ask, because it begs the question, based on everything I've been saying. Deconverted Man, how do you know that something is absolutely true without any doubt whatsoever that is impossible to be false? How do you know that?
Okay, now I guess we're transitioning from audience. I just want to make sure, did everyone in the audience ask all the questions before we start asking each other questions?
It's just, I think it's a question you should answer before you keep, people keep asking you questions and you still don't address the fact that you're assuming that your way
I think it's only fair that we allow our audience to ask us questions before we start asking each other questions.
Okay, formality, sorry, I'm sorry.
Okay, so logic tree and truth. I have a feeling you have a longer name than that. That's all that's showing on my screen. Are you both done asking questions? Soldier for.
My question was, were you looking for would it on the concept of what proof would change your mind? I wanted to know to clarify what you were looking for proof of. Would that be the Judeo-Christian God, or would it be any God?
In the context of this hangout, it would be my opponent's version of God. That was what was being debated.
So Judeo-Christian?
His version of the Judeo-Christian God. Just to be clear, because his version might not be the same as, say, my brother's version.
All right. Well, what it would take to convince me if of a version of the Judeo-Christian God would be, I would say, I would say, maybe a testable method, but more so to the point would be, because, again, it would go against a large concept. I'm guessing that your concept of the Judeo-Christian God doesn't just go willy-nilly and perform miracles.
Logic, you're asking questions to either one of us, not necessarily to Soldier and you guys. This is...
I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm being a bother.
No. Not. I'm trying to moderate because my moderator's sleepy.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to assume the audience is happy. Okay, Logic and Soldier. Okay,
What's
they're
that?
happy.
We're
I've
happy.
declared you both happy. We're going to ask each other questions
Okay,
now.
can I ask my question now then?
Yes, go ahead, Root Times. You ask your question, I'll give you an answer, then I ask you a question. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right, go ahead.
How do you know something is 100% true and it's impossible to be false?
Hard solvelism hasn't been solved yet, so you can't. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Hard solvelism hasn't been solved yet, so you can't.
No, I'm saying because you base your arguments on assumptions. So you assume you assume that you're absolutely right. Statement? It is a statement that you assume that you're right, that your method is
so your special knowledge just right now. Got it. Can you make a statement that's free of fallacies? Like, at all? Okay, that wasn't fair. So you want me to solve hard solvelism for you?
No, I just want you to explain why do you think that your way of knowing something is the only way.
Did I ever say that?
You say that because that is an assumption. I'm basing the assumption on the fact that you say
that a special knowledge claim, so you should be.
I explain. I made the assumption at the moment, but not really in the bigger picture. I'm gonna show where I'm coming from with that supposed assumption, which is not.
It is an assumption. You shouldn't make assumptions.
I'm gonna show you why it's not an assumption.
Ask me.
I'm gonna show you why it's not an assumption that I'm making. Because you say that if science, says
right now.
I think you're trying to ignore my question because you're afraid of answering the question. Is that the problem?
I answered your question. Your initial question was, how do we know?
No, that is not. I asked the question a million different times because you don't seem to answer the question. The question is, you say that if science shows the natural, because you didn't answer the question. If science contradicts the nature of God, how is it that science has to be right and then
science, you like science when it's the Kalam cosmological argument.
I'm not making. No, that is an assumption. That is an assumption in the strawman. Okay.
So you assume the Kalam.
If you want to call fallacies, listen to yourself first. Okay. You said that if science contradicts God, that God has to be wrong and science has to be right. You made that statement. That's
No,
not an assumption.
Not in that way, no.
Okay. Okay, you don't want to, hold on to your claims. That's fine.
You can go back
what
and
you actually said.
this is what I actually said. I'll go back because maybe you didn't hear me. Maybe you weren't listening. Maybe you weren't paying attention.
The part where you said
Either the
historical,
concept of God exists in reality or as a concept in our brain. Do you agree with that disjunctive syllogism, yes or no?
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay. So I'm asking my question. You asked yours. I answered yours. Now you're not answering mine.
Okay,
so we're
what
done.
is the question? I'm sorry. I didn't
Let's
think
try again. Let's try again. Either this concept of God exists in reality or in our brain. Do you agree with that disjunctive syllogism? Yes or no?
You have to show why it's a concept. You have to define concept. You're just not explaining your claim.
Let's try it again. Do you agree that this disjunctive syllogism, either God exists in reality or as a concept in our brain? Do you agree with that disjunctive syllogism? Yes
No.
or no?
No.
No. Then you weren't debating in this debate, and I won.
Okay.
I don't know what debate you were in, but
You
that
seem
was what
very
this whole debate was based on.
You seem
So
very
you didn't agree with the question of the debate. The
Okay.
debate question was, does the Christian God exist?
Okay, I misunderstood. Okay, I'm
or
sorry.
reality with everything
There was
else?
a
You
stop.
just said you don't
I'm
agree with
sorry.
it.
I'm sorry.
You weren't debating.
I obviously made a mistake because I actually made a claim for God. I just didn't understand the question you were saying. Okay.
All right. Let me
Okay.
try again.
Okay.
The following disjunctive syllogism is one you either agree with or don't. If you don't, the whole debate goes away.
Okay.
It was the first premise, which is the question that we're debating itself.
Okay.
Either the Christian God exists as a concept in our brain or in reality with everything else.
Either, yes.
Okay. So you agreed with premise 1. Now, the second premise I think you're having problems with, which was any God concept that requires a rejection of reality on any level could only exist in the brain. In other words, if somebody says, for their God to be true, the earth must be flat. Do you think that the earth is flat? Oh, I don't. It's an obloid spheroid. That's a very small percentage of people actually think that the earth is flat and promote that idea. But I'm not one of them. Are you?
Okay, can you state the question again? Because you went on a tangent.
Either the premise 2 was any God concept that required a rejection of reality on any level could only exist in the brain. For example, the people that say that the earth is flat and that it says that somewhere in the Bible and that is a requirement to believe in their God. That God could only exist in the brain because the world is not flat, it's an obloid spheroid.
You're basing your premise on an assumption that what you think reality is, it's actually reality. If your reality is infallible, then yes, if it contradicts reality, then there would be a conflict. But you would have to show what do you mean by reality and how you can be certain that the reality that you think is the actual one.
Okay, so you're saying in order for you to agree with the second premise, I have to solve hard selfism?
No, you would have to show how do you know that reality is true. If the reality,
right.
If
know
the
what hard
reality
selfism
is
is,
true, I just accept it.
aside.
I just accepted that if the actual reality is actually true, then it cannot contradict. But the thing is that it's unknowable. There is no way for you to know the actual reality. You may know, but you may not know. There's no way to know 100%. And therefore, that statement is based on the assumption.
So you're arguing for skepticism now. Thank you.
No, I'm just asking for a logical. I try to be logical.
We can't even get past the second premise that I have. You're saying
because
assume
it's based
that
on the
reality
assumption.
is real.
It's based on the assumption that the reality that you know is the actual one. It is based on the assumption. You cannot Just
Yeah, that's
bypass,
the a priori
bypass
belief that
an
we all
assumption.
hold.
That is a fallacy. That you
No, it's
base-
not.
Okay.
Are you saying that reality is a fallacy?
That basing an argument on an assumption, it is a fallacy. You
How
cannot
is
base-
saying that any rejection of
because you have to
reality.
show how do you know that the reality is the reality.
Right.
There's
You're
no
just
way to
asking the
know,
same
since
question
that's
over
an
and over again.
unknowable. Since it is an unknowable, there's no
do
way
what
you can make that
reality
statement.
Yeah, we can't know what reality is. Okay, game over. We all lost. That's a good argument for skepticism, but not a very good one for anything
It
else.
doesn't matter what you label. I'm trying to make sense, and you seem to fail to
Yeah,
do
you're
that.
trying, but not doing very well.
You're-
Here,
in
let me
that
make a
case,
claim right now. I'm doing magic. Do you see it?
I don't see magic. I see the light.
That's magic. Prove me wrong.
I've never done that. I never tried to tell you to prove me wrong. That's a strong man. I think
Well, that is it magic?
that's. I don't see how that's relevant to anything
Is it
I'm talking
magic?
about. I'm saying
Did what I just
I'm
do is
saying
magic?
that
You
your
shouldn't have liked-
premise is based on assumption. That is
So
what
is
I'm
yours.
saying.
So
I
is yours,
explained logically
yours,
how
yours.
I got there. I explained. You're just making a statement. You're not explaining where you're coming from. The sound argument for it. You're just making a statement
You know
based
these
on the
words, but it
assumption.
doesn't seem
I've
like you
never. I
understand.
haven't done that. I haven't just stated something
Okay.
based on the assumption without showing any
You're all-
logical
You're
explanation.
all over the map, Rube. You're all over the map. Calm down. Calm down. I'm attacking your ideas, not you. Okay?
I think you're very disingenuous. That's all I'm saying.
I'm attacking your ideas, not you. I don't know you. Okay? I cannot attack you, and I wouldn't, even if I did know you. Okay? My second premise is essentially that if we have to deny an aspect of reality,
You haven't defined
That-
reality, and the argument to show that reality is actually the only reality.
reality being the reality that we all share, I think that was a given.
That's a
If you're-
statement rather than an argument.
Okay, so we should have done some more pre-debate, maybe, because you wanted hard definitions for these words.
I don't want definition. I want logical explanation for your assumption that the reality that we know it's infallible, that can't be wrong.
So, again, you want me to solve hard selfism, which I can't do. No one can.
You can mention. I don't even know what that thing is. Just explain
Exactly.
how I'm wrong. Just explain how I'm wrong before just saying.
I'm trying to, but you keep interrupting every time I try to explain in a different way. I'm running out of ways to explain. Okay,
Plain hard politics.
I'll explain hard selfism because I don't think you know what that is. Is that
I
true?
think I know, just not but the term.
You know, but it's just not the term. Pick
Okay.
one. It can't be both. Do you know what hard selfism is?
I just said that no.
No. There you go. Okay. So hard selfism is the philosophical stance that nobody, no human, can absolutely with 100% know anything except for their own existence, and even that is somewhat
That is
questionable.
solipsism.
This is a philosophical idea, and it's never been solved by anyone.
I know it by
period.
solipsism.
Huh?
I know it by solipsism.
That's what I said. Hard solipsism.
That sounds like a different word to me.
Okay, well. At any rate, that's never been solved, and it's unsolvable.
The thing is that you cannot base your argument on assumption. That is philosophical.
And I didn't. And I
An
never
assumption
did.
that the way you know reality is infallible, knowing that you have been
No,
wrong.
I never said that. And
Yes.
you know, and
Don't try to make
do
it seem like I'm
you have
doing
a
straw man's,
hard
because you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're being disingenuous. You're trying to make it seem like
I am. Wow.
that it's not. Okay.
What
Fine.
you're asking is
That's fine, man.
awesome.
Okay.
You're
You
asking
gotta be
for 100%
disingenuous.
proof. Okay.
Fine.
Wow. I guess I won. He quit. I was trying to answer his question, but he got frustrated.
What, is
That
he
was
gone?
cognitive dissonance in action.
Is he gone?
Yeah, he quit.
So is that not like a self-defeating argument, though, to say that you couldn't know anything for sure?
Yeah, you can't know what reality. He is trying to do. He switched from the Kalam to precept, and he was trying to say, how do we know anything for certain? Well, we don't. We can't. And then he said, well, then show me how you know that reality is infallible, or that our way of seeing reality is infallible. That again is hard self-realism. We can't. We
But
assume.
that statement right there, though, is that not self-defeating to say
Yeah.
that you can't know something for sure, because that in
Right.
itself is a truth claim. So how would you know that for sure?
Right. He precept destroys all theology and all logic and all everything. So it's no good for anybody. um,
We can't know.
we can't know anything for 100%. There's no quantifiable thing. Hard self-realism has been out there forever. Philosophers don't know what to do with it. I don't care. I assume that reality is real just like everyone else, and I'm happy with that assumption. It's an a priori belief. It's probably the only belief I hold is that reality is real. Second to
So,
that is that my senses are probably functioning decently enough for me to survive. Uh,
so
my
where were you going
example,
with that, though? Like, were you going to show that God goes against reality, or?
well, his particular version of God does, but maybe yours doesn't. He based his version of God on a broken copycat of the Kalam, which he didn't even present correctly, and even if he had presented correctly, goes against science, which then he demanded that we prove science works. So it's either, well, the Kalam says scientifically blah, which science never says what the Kalam says that it says, but science works right now while I'm using the Kalam, but the moment that you reject the Kalam based on science, now you have to prove that science works. It's basically what he was doing there. Uh, and you can't do that. You can't have your cake and eat it too, but that's what he was trying to do. Um, had had he presented a decent Kalam, it still would have been wrong scientifically. So if he's basing his concept of God on that wrongness, then his concept of God can only exist in his mind, unless he wants to say that, well, we can't really know what's real and that we're really sure of it, which is true, yeah, and that's a good argument for being skeptical of things, not just believing that there's a God to evade the question, which still doesn't solve the question. How do you know that God's real? How do you know anything? You don't. You still don't. So it didn't get out of the problem. It made more problems.
But I don't think any Christian just turns to any one specific thing to say,
No,
okay, that's why. You know, it's a
yeah,
cumulative
right.
case.
But he had his time to make his argument. He chose the Kalam. He didn't even say it correctly. He could have copied it from William Lane Crick's site and read it verbatim. For some reason, he didn't. I don't know what website he used, but whatever version he copied wasn't very good. So not only did he misrepresent the Kalam, but even if he had done the Kalam correctly, it still would have been fallacious within this particular debate. But he had his chance. Pre-debate, I told him set the time limit. He chose 5 minutes. He didn't know what time to choose. I said, how many rebuttals do you want? I don't know. I just want to do this kind of like casual conversation. I said, no, it's going to be moderated because, and that's what it's evolved into when we stopped the moderation. Just started trying to answer his question, and he overran my answer with more assertions. He didn't let me ever answer the question. He wasn't ever satisfied with the answer I gave. So that's why I wanted the debate moderated, because I figured it would do something like that. And I was right. But that concludes the debate. That concludes the Q&A. I don't want this to be all about me. So what? No moderator, you can't ask questions. Okay, fine. I'll break all the rules. I'll let the moderator ask me a question. Okay, just for you guys, because I love you all, the moderator's going to ask me a question, I would assume. You better be a question. No?
Not you.
Oh, not me? Okay, fine. Let's break more rules. Whatever.
I would actually like Truth to answer that second premise. Does your concept of God require you to deny any part of reality?
No.
No, he said. Oh, you can hear what he says. We're not asking the audience questions. That's not how it works. You know what? I fired my moderator. You're fired, brother. Okay, thank you all for listening and asking your questions. I'm sure there will be a lot of comments on this video. I will do my best to answer any questions that I will assume were just directed at me. If they're directed at the other guy, you can plus his name, whatever. If you felt like I ran over his words or vice versa, you can complain about that. For those keeping score, I had 2 formal fallacies during this debate. One of which was formatting issue. I rebutted his rebuttal when I should have been rebuttaling his opening, and because of that, I gave him 10 minutes and subtracted one of my own rebuttals. And the second one, no one noticed, so it will be homework for whoever wants to. As far as informal fallacies, I'll let the audience analyze and decide who made those, because I can't analyze my own argument. But I was right. Shh, don't talk. Okay, unless and until we have a logically coherent argument, we should be skeptical of the conclusions. I would have him say something and sign off, but he's gone. I will link to his channel in the description below. You can check him out, subscribe to him if you want, like his videos, do whatever you want. Be nice, always attack the ideas, never the person. That's it. Goodbye, everybody. And
Hey, we should do a debate too sometime soon if you want.